right? Then after that, we have فصل الربا. Now we go to the subject of الربا. We'll take few lines inshallah and then we stop. So الربا نوعان. He says الربا نوعان. الربا is two types. مثنى نوعان. And as we mentioned before, الربا linguistically comes from something الزيادة. Something has an increase. فإذا أنزلنا عليها الماء اهتزت وربت. When the water comes down on the earth, اهتزت وربت, increases. So it comes from the increase. So, and of course, riba has a definition to it. And that's why the definition is in the two kinds of riba that are mentioned here. نوعان, riba فضل وربا نسيئة. So it's two types, riba فضل وربا نسيئة. So you can say the definition that the riba is tafadul in some matters and nasi'a in some matters with specific matters, when it's all haram. So it has to be with these two types, riba fadl wa riba nasi'a. And al-fadl linguistically means extra, something that is given as an extra. And that's the fadl of Allah, the bounty of Allah. Why it's a bounty of Allah? Because a person does not deserve it, it's given as an extra thing by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not by the justice of Allah, it's by extra. He does not deserve it, but it's given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And al-fadl also, al-fadla min when you drink something and you leave something in the cup, for example, this is also the fadl, what is left from the person. So this is basically here in the context of al-riba is some form of a ziyada, some form of a extra as it's going to be defined. And al-nasi'a from al-nasa', and not al-nisa', al-nisa' women. Al-nasa' is something that is deferred, something that is delayed. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّمَا النَّسِيءُ زِيَادَةٌ فِي الْكُفْرِ. النَّسِيء that the disbelievers would make is that they would delay the الشهر الحرام to replace it by another month. So the linguistic of it is to have a delay. So الربا نوعان, riba fadl or riba nasi'a. So that means one type of riba is in increasing something, increasing the value, something is that it increased in volume, increased in weight. And riba nasi'a, something that has to do with delaying the payment or delaying the transaction. So this is the nasi'a. Then he will talk about each one and the definition of it. So then he says, فَرِبَ الْفَضْلِ. So therefore the riba of al-fadl, the riba of the increase, is يحرم, it's haram, في كل مكيل وموزون بيع بجنسه متفاضلا ولو يسيرا لا يتأتى. So now he says يحرم, that means it's haram in every makil wa mawzoon, in every makil. Al-makil is what's measured by volume, and mawzoon, everything that is measured by weight. بيع بجنسه, بيع, that means it's been sold, the past tense. بجنسه, al-jins is the kind. Right? بيع بجنسه, that means from the same kind. So something makil or mawzoon, something that is sold by volume or by weight, and it's from the same kind. From the same kind. متفاضلا with more, متفاضلا with increase. Before we continue, that means, which is the form of riba al-fadl, as the hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he mentioned it clearly, الذهب بالذهب والفضة بالفضة والبر بالبر والشعير بالشعير والتمر بالتمر والملح بالملح مثلا بمثل سواء بسواء يدا بيد. Which is, say for example, something that is al-burr, for example, which is the wheat, or al-milh, or salt, something that is measured with weight or with volume. Can you purchase milh with milh? Two types of salt, one of a good quality versus something that is of a bad quality. So they are from the same type, and they are either weight or measured with volume. So you cannot, it's haram to exchange, to buy salt with salt, because they're of the same type and they are makil or mawzoon, that are measured with volume or weight. متفاضلا, by giving more. Like you can exchange, but it has to be 1 pound versus 1 pound. Even if one of a better quality than the other. You cannot have 2 pounds of the bad quality versus 1 pound of the good quality. You cannot do that in anything that is measured with weight or volume because they're of the same type. Dates with dates, salt with salt, and so on. What should you do then in that case? Because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, you can either do it in the same weight or the same volume, it has to be yadan biyad, hand to hand, or purchase one kind, get money for it, and then purchase the new one. Right? So, but you cannot exchange it. As we said, al-bay' it doesn't have to be money versus something else. This is what people are doing now. But if you exchange something with something else, you're buying and selling. But the money that you're giving doesn't have to be money, it can be something else. So the first here is يحرم في كل مكيل وموزون بيع بجنسه متفاضلا بيع بجنسه from the same kind so the famous example is tamr with tamr, even if it's different types. You cannot sell tamr with tamr, exchange tamr with tamr, dates with dates, unless it's the same weight. Or tamr, they used to do it with volume, but now it's with weight. So unless it's the same, so 1 pound versus 1 pound, even that 1 pound is worth $20 and the other one is worth $2. It doesn't matter. If you want to exchange it like this, you cannot increase the weight of one to make them even. So therefore, just sell it and get the money and purchase the other one. بجنسه متفاضلا. So but we want to make sure that every word is clear. يحرم حرام في كل, in every مكيل وموزون. And المكيل والموزون, when we look at the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we'll get into some details of that inshallah. And we know what al-makil and what's al-mawzun, right? Al-makil is the thing that is being measured with volume. And al-mawzun is the thing that is being weighed. Al-mikyal is what? Is the instrument of measuring the volume. That's al-mikyal. Al-mizan is the instrument that is used for weight. So this is, you have al-mikyal and al-mizan, and you have makil wa mawzun. What is being measured with volume, what is being measured with weight. And there is kiltu, wazantu, that means I measured something with volume, I measured something with weight. So the word makil and mawzun here refers to, for example, the food. The food doesn't have to be food, of course, because anything, iron, steel, whatever. So يحرم, it's haram في كل مكيل وموزون بيع بجنسه, sold by the same kind. تمر with تمر. متفاضلا, to give more in one kind versus the other. ولو يسيرا لا يتأتى. ولو, even if it's something يسير, something small, لا يتأتى, the word يتأتى, يأتي, comes. لا يتأتى, that means it can never be attained, being weighed or measured with one. For example, tamr. You purchase tamr nowadays with weighing it. But if it's one piece of date, can you exchange one bad date with a good date, but 2 for 1? Give you 2 dates. You can be sitting in the masjid, but of course people, buying and selling, right? You're exchanging 2 dates from a lower quality versus 1 date, the Tamr al-Madina, for example, or 3 versus 4. It's not permissible. That's what it says, وَلَوْ يَسِيرًا. Because you're not going to, you cannot wait 3 and you cannot wait 1. So if that's the word, وَلَوْ يَسِيرًا لا يتأتى. لا يتأتى is not even, it can never be weighed or can never be measured with volume. So you don't say, well, if it's not, it's makil and mawzun, it's something to be measured with volume or with weight. But this is something we cannot measure this. We don't have the means to, it's not even perceived to be measured. But the makil and the mawzun is with regards to what known to be makil and mawzun, not the fact that it's been to be weighed or measured with volume. That's why al-kayl is kayl of al-Madina and al-wazn wazn Ahl Makkah. So there's list of things. This is makil and this is mawzun. And does it change with the urf of the people? Yes, according to some opinions. And this is what people are doing in the days that we live in. So clear. So في كل مكين وموزون بيع بجنسه متفاضلا ولو يسيرا لا يتأتى. Inshallah, we took the riba before, but we just want to make sure that every sentence is clear. So يحرم في كل مكيل وموزون بيع بجنسه متفاضلا, sold from the same type with more, with increase. He says ولو يسيرا لا يتأتى, even if it's something that is less, cannot be weighed or measured. ويصح به متساويا. So this is the haram. Now يصح, valid, it's correct, it's fine. به, meaning with the same kind. That means you're going to exchange dates with dates. متساويا. متساويا, that means equal. So if it's the same amount, no problem. 2 pounds versus 2 pounds, that's fine. يصح. وبغيره مطلقا. وبغيره, that means if it's a different kind, مطلقا in the absolute sense, it doesn't matter. Then if it's not the same kind, it's okay. You can have different weights, right? So if it's you're exchanging tamr with salt, right? You cannot say, well, I'm going to give you 1 pound of dates versus 1 pound of salt. No, you can change the quantity. You can have more of something and less in something else. Why? Because now there are different kinds. They're different kinds. Even both are makil and mawzoon, but different kind, not from the same jins, not from the same kind, but with a condition. So ويصح به متساويا وبغيره مطلقا. بغير مطلقا, that means without being equal. بغيره, other than the same kind, مطلقا, meaning without being equal. بشرط قبض قبل تفرق, with a condition that there is qabd, that they would have it hand to hand before they depart. Okay, so here now, to make it easy to understand it, and we talked about it before, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is important for us to see or to remember. You have الذهب بالذهب والفضة بالفضة والبر بالبر إلى آخره. So these are they call it الأموال الربوية. The riba in الفضل, riba الفضل is not in all matters, only in these things. Things that is either measured with volume or weight, or النقد, which is also included here, which is the thaman, something that people use for money. That's the gold and the silver. So if it's the same kind, you cannot exchange the same kind with more, and you cannot defer it also. The riba nasiya also apply here. If it's different kinds, then, and they're both from the amwal ribawiyya, they're both from the riba applies on it, but they're different kinds. Tamr with salt, tamr with barley, things like this. Then in that case, you can have differences in the weight, difference in the volumes, but it has to be hand to hand because they're both riba categories. Correct? But if it's something of riba category, tamr versus something else, a car, for example, right? Then it can be different ways of weights, right? And it can be with even deferred, it doesn't matter because they're two completely different. Cars are not from al-amwal al-ribawi. So al-amwal al-ribawiya, according to the Shara, is the thing that is money and the gold and silver, which is the gold and silver, and things that are weight or measured by weight or measured by volume. So these things from the same kind, you cannot increase and you cannot defer it. And it's from different kinds, you can increase, but you cannot defer it. If it's from completely different from one another, then you can defer it and you can also be not of the same time. And that's why the الذهب والفضة, as he will mention it, some would consider it as an exception, or it's the category of it is a thamaniya from the price. Like if you have gold versus dates, right? They're not the same kind and they're from two different categories. So that means what? The quantity is not the same, of course, and it can be deferred. You don't have to pay it all up front. It doesn't have to be hand to hand. This is basically money, and money comes into the same ruling as the gold and silver. So if you're purchasing with your money gold, right, You can have differences in quantity, but it has to be hand to hand. Because money and gold and silver are one category. The ways and the things that are weighed and measured are one category. Understand? So you have two categories here. If it's from the same category, from the same kind, no increase, no nasi'ah. No fadl, no nasi'ah. If it's from the same category but different kinds, you can have fadl, you can have increase, but no nasi'ah. It has to be hand to hand. Right? But if it's from two different categories, right, both are fine. You can have more increase and you can have nasi'ah. Category meaning الذهب والفضة is one category and the pricing comes with it, the money. And the other category is the المكيل والموزون. Right? If it's in the board, becomes also easy, but hopefully this is clear, inshallah. Right? So this is, when you go back again here and say يحرم في كل مكين وموزون بيع بجنسه متفاضلا, sold by his same type متفاضلا ولو يسير, even if it's less, لا يتأتى. ويصح به متساوين, it's fine if it's متساوين, if it's equal. وبغير مطلقا, if it's other than the same kind, no problem, doesn't have to be equal in quantity. بشرط قبض قبل تفرق, with the condition that the qabd, that means that you give it hand to hand before departing from the majlis or from the gathering of buying and selling. Because of time, but he says لا مكيل بجنسه وزنا ولا عكسه. That means you cannot sell makil, something that is known by volume, by the same type wazn. So for example, if the dates used to be given by volume measures, right? Can you exchange 2 liters of volume of a sack that has dates with 4 kilograms of dates? So volume versus weight, right? Can you exchange from the same type? لا مكيل بجنسه وزنا. You cannot do that because it's the same type still, right? You have dates versus dates. ولا مكيل بجنسه وزنا ولا عكسه. And the opposite also, it's true. إلا إذا علم تساويهما في المعيار الشرعي. Unless it's known that they are equal in the معيار الشرعي. المعيار is the unit of measure, is the according to the shar', of course, according to the matters of the shar'. So that means and المعيار الشرعي, it's what's known at the time of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. So that means you cannot make that analogy. You cannot measure gold with volume, and you cannot take weight of the dates, right? Because it has to be equal. So if it's that the case, then you weight what is weighed at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and you measure with volume what's measured at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But again, if the urf changes, this is fine. But again, it's the same kind. You cannot exchange it with increase. Clear? And we can talk about it again, inshallah ta'ala, next time. But the riba of al-fadl or riba al-nasi'ah. Is the sentences clear? I'm not reading. No. No, salt and date, because they're the same category, same type, or not the same kind, but the same type. So you can increase the quantity. The quantity doesn't have to be the same, but it has to be hand to hand. But since the gold is from a different category than the salt or than the dates, then the quantity doesn't have to be the same. Quantity meaning it's not 2 kilograms of gold versus 2 kilograms of dates. Of course, it doesn't work that way. So the quantity is not the same, and you can have it also deferred. You don't have to pay it all up front. But with the salt and date, you have to give it hand to hand, even though the quantity is not the same. Because there is riba fadl and riba nasi'ah. There is the riba of al-fadl, the differences in the quantity, and the nasi'ah is the deferred in payment. Inshallah, get a diagram also that we can read from it, inshallah, or make it so that it's easy. I'm thinking that Isha is 9:15. طب let's read it first inshallah from where we took today. ومن اشترى فصل. Read it inshallah. ومن اشترى مكيلا ونحوه لزم بالعقد ولم يصح تصرفه فيه قبل قبضه ويحصل قبض ما بيع بكيل ونحوه بذلك مع حضور مشتر أو نائبه ووعاؤه كيده وصبرة ومنقول بنقل وما يتناول بتناوله وغيره بتخلية والإقالة فسخ تسن للنادم. فصل. الربا نوعان: ربا فضل وربا نسيئة. فربا الفضل يحرم في كل مكيل وموزون بيع بجنسه متفاضلا ولو يسيرا لا يتأتى ويصح به متساويا وبغيره مطلقا بشرط قبض قبل تفرق لا مكيل بجنسه وزنا ولا عكسه إلا إذا علم تساويهما في المعيار الشرعي. So you know all of this inshallah in Arabic, right? So the part in Riba al-Fadl inshallah we'll go through it inshallah ta'ala again next time, but see if you have any questions. مشتر أو نائبه. نعم. Representative, yes. الأموال الربوية. What do you mean? Yeah, when we talk about riba, we're only talking about these things, which is the أموال الربوية, or this is what they call it علة الربا. Why these things has riba? It's only in these things. So it's in the money, it's in gold and silver, and things that are weighed or measured with volume. Fine. Yes, this is the meaning of yadan biyad. And of course, the Prophet ﷺ, when the hadith is mentioned clearly, like ذهب بالذهب والفضة, ذهب is with ذهب. This is like when you read the hadith, gold with gold. What is the meaning of ذهب بالذهب? That means you have to, when you exchange gold with gold, or فضة with فضة, silver with silver, البر بالبر, الشعير بالشعير, والتمر بالتمر, and the date will say والملح بالملح, and the salt with salt, مثلا بمثل, exactly the same. If you do it like this, it has to be مثلا بمثل. This is the quantity. سواء بسواء, exactly the same. مثلا بمثل, سواء بسواء, exactly the same. يدا بيد, hand to hand. This is to avoid the نسيئة or the deferred payment. فإذا اختلفت هذه الأصناف, that's the hadith. If these أصناف, if these categories differs, فبيعوا كيف شئتم. Then sell and buy the way that you wish. إذا كان يدا بيد, as long as it's hand to hand. As long as it's hand to hand within these only. Right? No. So, and we'll continue inshallah ta'ala. Before we end, we have the hadith. We have Jami' Ulum al-Hikam this time, from the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, or Jami' Ulum al-Hikam. And it should be hadith number 139. Hadith 139, as if I have it, you know. Jazakallah khair. Hadith 139. Hadith 139. Okay. You guys there? 139. عن جابر بن عبد الله رضي الله عنه. عن جابر بن عبد الله رضي الله عنهما. It's taken the copy and paste. أن رجلا سأل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال: أرأيت إذا صليت المكتوبات وصمت رمضان وأحللت الحلال وحرمت الحرام ولم أزد على ذلك شيئا أأدخل الجنة؟ قال: نعم. رواه مسلم. So this hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, a man came and he asked the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he said, O Messenger of Allah, as some of the narrations, أرأيت إذا صليت المكتوب. أرأيت is what if, right? So, and الرؤيا is when you see something, like you see if I, like this. So أرأيت, that means if you, you know, if I إذا صليت المكتوبات, if I prayed المكتوبات. المكتوب is what's written, which is the obligations, the obligatory salah. وصمت رمضان, and I fasted Ramadan. وأحللت الحلال, and I made the halal halal, meaning in my life I would deal with it as permissible. وحرمت الحرام, and I forbade the haram. The haram is haram, whether you forbade it or whether you don't forbade it, it's haram. But the meaning of حرمت الحرام, that means I forbade it upon myself. I stayed away from it. وحرمت الحرام ولم أزد على ذلك شيئا, and I did not increase anything over that. أأدخل الجنة? Would I enter Jannah? أأدخل الجنة? Asking the question. The Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he said نعم. He said yes. So that shows the evidence that whoever establish the obligatory actions and he stay away from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade, right, he will enter the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he dies upon that state, of course. And even though some other things are not mentioned there, the zakah, the hajj, right, so nobody is to take this hadith says only salah and siyam. Because this is ignorance if someone do that. And that refers to all the obligations. And whether it's the other obligations were not yet revealed at the time when this man asked, or just examples of what is obligation upon the person. And that's also included in أحللت الحلال وحرمت الحرام. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade for those who have money not to pay zakah, so comes into that category. So anything in that, a person, if he does it, he will, as the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, he will enter the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also with the other ayat and the hadith, as that shows that some of the believers will enter the hellfire, even though they established these things with sins. They died in the state of sins and they did not repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Either Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would forgive them, or if they're punished, they eventually enter Jannah. So again, things has to be taken with all of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and the ayat of the Quran. And the most important thing of all, of course, is the Tawheed, in which a person, if he doesn't have it, he would not enter Jannah and he would be in hellfire forever. And then to be upon the obligations and to stay away from the haram. 1 or 2 questions, inshallah, for a few minutes. 2-3 minutes. Any questions? Anything that is not clear? And by the way, it's when you read the mutun, it's meant to be difficult, as we said before. It needs to be. And with the dama'ir, what's damir in English? Bihi, like this. What is it called? Damir. Huwa, hiya. Huh? Pronouns. Sometimes they leave it to not clear, so that people put effort. So when you put effort in something and you make sure that you don't skip a word, you remember it, you memorize it, you'll have it, you put effort in it. So it's meant to be that way. And also for people not to speak in matters of knowledge without ilm. So it requires they would test the students, those who really want to study the deen, they would put the effort and they learn it and things like this. So, but inshallah ta'ala, we'll go over it inshallah ta'ala also next time to make sure that it's clear inshallah. بارك الله فيكم صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم سبحانك اللهم ربنا بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Anyone gives the adhan?